Well, I've got about 15 minutes, so the topic that I was asked to speak specifically about was ethical leadership. And it's just an awful lot out there about leadership, and I've looked at it, I've studied it for a fair amount of years. But to really focus it on ethical leadership, I think, gets me to look at 4 to 6 important areas. And what I want to do is, by way of just talking about the way I see ethical leadership, is to lay some issues out that I hope that we could talk about after my 15 minutes brief presentation. And let me hold myself to that. So, Jesuits try to do things in threes. I've got 6 right here. So, rather than pack it into 3 and when there are really 6 concepts, let me try them and see how we go. Robert Coles, many of you know who Robert Coles is. He's a psychiatrist at Harvard. Robert Coles likes to say that ethical leadership is the way you act when no one is watching. And again, lots of fancy definitions for ethical leadership. That's a good one to me. If no one were watching you, or there was no way that there would be any repercussions from what you did or who you were, how would you act? How might you act? And I think that that's a good way to look at the ethical piece. It's also, I think, important to note that numerous studies have shown that half of the American population, in whatever field of work they choose, say that on a regular basis they're tempted to act in an unethical way, in an unethical manner. Something in their daily lives presents itself that it could, if they chose to, act in some sort of unethical manner. So I guess what that says is we're all there. It's a part of who we are. And what I would posit from the beginning is it's not so much whether or not we have been engaged in some form of unethical behavior. The question is what has happened after that particular incident took place. And I would put myself right in the midst of that. I mean, I could highlight numerous times from the time I was in high school on through, where I may have been engaged in some kind of behavior that might have somehow been considered inappropriate or wrongdoing, or in some cases unethical. The question is, what did we learn from those experiences, and how does it impact our lives that follows? So what I would posit is we're all involved in ethical leadership. We're all involved in unethical behavior at some level. How do we make right decisions, and how do we learn from that being most important? I'm going to touch real briefly, 6 areas that I think that you need to be connected with, you need to be involved with, if in fact you see yourselves as an ethical leader. Again, these are my ideas, and I'm certainly open to how you might see it differently. But I think you've got to look at 6 different elements. The first that I'll mention is you need to make a commitment to go on an inner journey. There's no way that I see people as ethical leaders if in fact they've not gone inside, done some soul searching, know what it means to be in solitude with themselves, have begun a journey, and it's not arrived. It's not like people have just come to a place where they stop the journey, but that they're on this continual journey to figure out who they are, what it is that their core values are all about. I know, for instance, that there have been a number of faculty that have said they've asked students to, as part of their assignments, to take 20 minutes a day to just be with themselves. No technology, no roommates, no anything. Take 20 minutes a day in solitude. No particular assignment other than that. And that a number of faculty have said that students will often come back a couple of weeks into the assignment and say, I can't do that. That's too hard to do. Can we just do it for 5 minutes a day or whatever? The notion that we are okay with who we are and that we take time, do the soul searching to figure out what it is that makes us tick, what it is that we stand for most, I think is a very important concept, and what I would call is maybe the number one issue in terms of ethical leadership. Ethical leaders have to know who they are, or at least be engaged in that journey to figure out what it is that they stand for most. We do an exercise with students oftentimes where we say to them, take 10 values, things that you value most, 10. whether that be solitude or peace, or name your significant values. Then narrow it to 5, and then narrow it to 3. And then rank order your 3 most important values. That's a really difficult task for most human beings to do. But students sometimes find this particularly difficult. And then once you've identified those 3, then the question becomes, how often do you find yourself living those values out on a daily basis? If you took your entire day and you took those 3 values that you hold most dear, how often are you tempted to veer away from that? How often do you stay focused on that? And I would argue that's a lot of where that ethical behavior resides. And that ethical leaders are not so much that they've arrived, but they know they've begun that journey where they're constantly looking at their day in terms of, am I living out the values that I hold most dear? And that only happens when you go internal. You go into yourself and can work with that.